And hello again, beautiful humans. Up next, please help me welcome Sonal and Robert. Sonal Rattan is the co-founder and CTO of eXate, and Robert is the Chief Product Officer. So thank you both for joining today. I can only imagine this is a worldwide event, so I hope it's not too horribly late, yet that may be some wishful thinking.
Hi from London. So yes, it is getting a little bit late, more late for Rob. He's out in sunny Spain, lucky guy.
Well, thank you both, and we look forward to learning more about data protection and gateways.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jen, and hi all. Thanks for taking the time to listen to us today. This talk has been designed to talk mainly about API data protection in gateways. What we're really going to look to talk about is why data protection is so important and like what are some of the risks about getting it wrong. We're also going to talk a bit about the evolution of API programs and how gateways will become integral to all things around data in motion. So Rob and I are thrilled to be here. So thank you so much again. But I'm Sonal. I'm the CTO and co-founder of eXate. Rob is our Chief Product Officer. We've worked together for many years from a client and a vendor perspective, and now we're very, very lucky to have Rob on board as our Chief Product Officer. But collectively, what our vision is to be that global standard for the secure and trusted exchange of data. So what does that mean? As an industry, we recognize that we have to be a lot faster and make it a lot easier to find and consume data. This means being able to reuse data and being able, considering how APIs have grown over the last few years, is to be in a secure and compliant manner. To be fast, we need technology to help us and not hinder us. And again, when we're talking about gateways, we are talking about how we can produce, how can they help us to be a lot faster and give us those controls and to help us eliminate some of those risks. So, sorry, I'm just, this guy couldn't click then. Our key focus is going to be mainly around API security, but if we look at the industry, they too, their key focus areas are going to be around data security. So if we look at that, managed and unsecured APIs are creating so many vulnerabilities that it could accelerate to multi-million-dollar security incidents. And we've been looking at some of the reports that are coming out from Gartner, from Forrester. These are things that are now becoming top of house for companies. By 2025, we're expecting to see at least 50% of APIs that will be unmanaged. So we know that 50% is going to be managed, but what about the ones that are not? The explosive growth in APIs will mean that it will very, very quickly surpass the capabilities of current API management tools. So it's just worth understanding what are we not managing and what risks does that pose for us? And in the last talk that we had at Apidays Helsinki, the keynote from Mehdi was data API security is its own segment, but privacy will be the differentiator for this. And that is where we are seeing that big focus, and not just on API security, it's all around API data security. So if we look at it from how we've seen it today, so APIs and all the things around digital, they are the solution for that digital problem that we've had. But it's also now becoming a problem. So if we look at data in motion, Gartner has said that APIs are now become the most frequent attack vector. So as much as we are deploying from that, and if we look at the pace that we are transforming, we know that we're seeing more and more incidents in our gateways. So not in our gateways, in our APIs. So 91% of organizations have said that they've had some sort of security incident involving their APIs. And we understand that from a security standpoint, but the risk of getting that wrong and what it means, it is driving a lot of different regulation as well. And we should focus a little bit around that macro conditions around what's driving the need for this privacy and why data breaches are so bad. So if we look at it from a regulatory perspective, we know that 80% of countries are adopting some sort of data protection regulation. That's covering 2/3 of the world's population. So when we are looking at data protection and we are looking at these regimes, why they're being put into place, it is to protect those consumers, because we're seeing unprecedented rate of growth in data. Additionally, it's that digital risk. When we look at digital transformation, we have been the pace since COVID has been in dog years, and we do recognize that the controls people are struggling to keep on top of what's actually getting shipped out there. And there is a lot of remediation work that companies are going to have to do to make sure that they are keeping safe and secure. But more importantly, if you think about the regular reputational risk, this is not just talking about the statistics around how consumers won't do business with you. And 87% of us do think that they will not do business with a company that they believe that they've got like dodgy security practices. It's the impact of what it does to actual businesses. 7% of share price have been dropped after a data breach, and that really does get people's attention. That you're talking real money, and it's not just the organization. It's not that it just happened. It's actually really a big concern for a lot of organizations, to the degree that 94% of companies now have to provide these privacy metrics to their boards. So what is the risk of getting it wrong? So if you look at Wirecard, this is a recent breach. It's 1.2 million they got sued for this. It doesn't feel that big, but for an SME, that's a huge amount of money. But what was interesting about this is the Attorney General, that his view on it, he was just saying it's not a good business model to protect data. It's actually the law. And we do recognize that 2/3 of the world's population is governed by this law. And if we are not putting these controls in place, we are actually breaking the law. That's essentially what's happening here. But I just thought it was really interesting and really powerful statement that he was saying, if you shouldn't be skimping on data security as a cost-saving measure. This should be inbuilt. It really should be at the forefront of some of these things that we should be looking at. So this is focusing around data protection, but that's not the only risk that we've got. It's what are you using the data for? So it's all well and good having an API program and letting consumers find and discover and being able to access it at pace. Twitter's has recently just been fined 150 million. Okay, it might be small beans for Twitter, but it's still a lot of money considering how much we're spending on these programs. If they were collecting users' phone numbers for multi-factor authentication, somebody found that information and used it for advertising purposes. So they were using those phone numbers to reach out to them, to market to them. Okay, it's against the law. It is both in violation of EU and US laws. But if we've all worked in large organizations, how easy is that really to happen? Anyone could have been in that place. You don't know where that data has been collected from. Half the time, we don't know where data is. It is a holistic issue across organizations where data is being captured. We don't know what's happening with it. And then we're using it and accidentally creating $150 million penalty off the back of it. People are going to lose their jobs over that. So it's it's just an interesting thing that's happening in the market, where it's not just data protection. It's what are you using it for? Have you got permission to use it for that? You should have access for it for multi-factor authentication, but for this, maybe not so much. So a little bit about us. Like, we recognize as an organization, it's not easy. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. But us at eXate, our job is to make it easy. And if we're not, that's essentially we've got something wrong. In the most simplistic form, we are a software platform to enforce data protection between APIs, applications, and databases. And as a technology, we are doing a lot of work around aggregating different privacy-enhancing technologies and being able to apply it in different places. We ourselves are going to focus around gateways and how some of the problems that we had in our corporate careers. And I'll hand over to Rob in a minute to actually go through some of that journey as what we work through as an organization, as a client as well. So overall, just being able to automate some of this data privacy and this data protection, we call it smart data privacy because we're being much, much smarter in the way that we're doing it. And hopefully it'll become more clear as Rob goes through his part of the presentation. And you can also find us at developer@eXate.co, and you can go ahead and try our APIs. So over to you, Rob.
Okay, thanks, Sonal. Okay, so how does this work realistically for us, and what are the things that we've discovered through running and building and operating API programs? at large scale globally. But I think it's worth just focusing back a wee bit on, why are we doing this? We're doing this because digital initiatives are increasing that demand for data access. Everybody wants our data. Everybody wants to use it differently. Everybody wants access to it. And these digital initiatives are great, but we're still living in a little bit of a dream world where everyone thinks they can just get at what they want. And especially when we start to look at the practicalities of that, when somebody asks for this data, when somebody asks, what's your API? Do you actually know who this is? Do you know where they're domiciled? Why are they even using it? Going back to the Twitter example, are you trying to reuse data that you shouldn't be using? Are you having to create different APIs or interfaces to service different access patterns? One of the anti-patterns that I've seen over and over again is, as soon as a new demanding customer arrives who says they can't take the data as your customer API says it should be given, we run off and build another one. We build a specific point-to-point API there. And how many of those just keep building and building and building? How many hundreds of APIs suddenly appear? How many thousands of APIs suddenly appear? And I think, so just referencing back to the previous session, that exponential growth starts to begin because we were building different things for different access patterns. How do you, and I think point 3 is massively important. It's a risky business, or APIs. You're suddenly opening the front door. You're giving an attack vector that you never had before. You're sort of breaking down the firewall, if you like. How do you make sure you're not bringing greater risk in? How do you make sure that the risk of data breaches, data misuse isn't there? How do you minimize that? And are your API consumers and producers, are they actually compliant? And actually, do they even understand the regulations around this data? Do they understand the limitations of sharing this data, of where it can be domiciled and where it can't be domiciled? So we're driving all this great innovation and all these initiatives, but there's all these factors behind it. Okay, so what do we actually do? And this sort of harks back a little bit to my previous life as an API product owner. And this is how we tend to all start out. And once again, a bit of a nod back to our previous session. We get an API gateway in, we release some APIs, and it's generally around a fairly simple use case. We've got a consumer out there in the cloud or beyond our firewall. We've got some data within our firewall, and we're going to use our API gateway to actually orchestrate that data through the firewall between the consumer and the producer. And it's great. I'm there on the left. I've got full visibility. I understand it. I understand where the data is going. I understand what they're using it for. I'm absolutely happy camper. But then the reality starts to kick in. If you go to the next slide. It actually becomes popular. Your API gateway suddenly becomes something that becomes popular, and everybody suddenly wants to tick the "I've built an API" box on their program. And what starts to happen is at the top of this diagram, your consumers start to build. So I've pulled out things like UK customers, US partners, SaaS products. They suddenly start appearing as part of this ecosystem. Obviously, the cloud services. Everyone's extending out from the cloud. But what that means behind here is we start off with this great utopian view of accounts, customers, orders, balances, whatever your corporate data model looks like. But actually, our accounts object doesn't service a US partner properly because of Schrems 2, for example, or GDPR regulations. So what happens? We start to build US specific versions of our APIs, or we start to build EU versions of customers, or Luxembourg accounts that have different mechanisms of protection. And all of a sudden, our nice model starts to increase exponentially. And what really starts to happen with these services is they start to become point-to-point services. And we start to lose a lot of reuse on these. They start to become just something that's got to be maintained for example, a US partner. Next slide. And it's like falling into the rabbit hole, basically. That visibility of who's consuming what, why, and how. I'm starting to lose sleep over this at night because we just can't be 100% sure anymore. There's just APIs sprouting up everywhere. Next slide. And then, of course, our service mesh appears, and life just gets so uncomfortable at this point. We've got services discovering each other. We've got the finding data. They're automatically generating keys. The visibility is just disappearing completely at this point of what's happening. I just can't tell anymore what and who's getting what data and for what purpose. So we all love and we all want to be here, but it's not a comfortable place as an API product owner. So I quite like this GIF. It sort of, once again, harks back a little bit to my corporate days, when we have lots and lots of services springing up, lots of legacy backends, lots of applications, and everybody wants them to be GDPR compliant. And to be quite honest with you, we shoveled money into the furnace at a rate of knots to try to do this, and quite frankly realized it was a thankless task. It was never going to complete. It was never actually going to be done. We had to come up with a better way of doing this. So what would I have done differently if I had my time again? I'd have done this pattern straight away. I'd have done it the moment that API gateway landed. This is what I've done. I'd have looked at data governance and compliance as part of my API platform and my service platform. Even though we've got a very simple use case here, I've got a pattern now in my gateway that says, I'm going to look at all data coming in, and I'm going to look at all data going out through any interfaces. And I'm going to be able to make some governance and compliance decisions over that data. I'm going to be able to actually redact it if required. I can stop you sending this piece of information to a consumer. I can audit it. I can advise on it. I can do all sorts of things on it. But I need to get this pattern in. If I get this pattern in early, get developers not writing this in their back ends and not writing it in their front ends, but it's actually sat in my gateway now. So it's ubiquitous. It's just there. You are protected by default. If you go to the next slide, Sonal. It makes my life so much easier when I get to here. We've got the pattern now. We're looking at all information coming through our gateways. We've got a place that we can see, we're all seeing, all ubiquitous. But what it's going to start to give me is I can now go back to my accounts definition, my customer definition, my order definition, my balance definition, and my governance and compliance platform can help me modify or change or redact information based on where that data is flowing. So I may have a standard customer reference, object, I should say. I'm sending it to the US. I can apply the US rules to that data. I can do it on the fly. I can get it done straight away. I don't need point-to-point solutions anymore. I'm simplified and I can reuse. So where are we going with this? Our view is that the best way to do this is this technology should be part of the gateways. It should be part of service mesh technologies. It should be injectable. It should be there. And it's missing, let's be honest, from a lot of gateways. It's not part of the ecosystem. It's just not there at the moment. And you've got to sort of hand crank a lot. If you're going to do this, you've got to hand crank a lot of this yourself, unless, of course, you use our technology. But where we're seeing a big shift now is obviously we're thinking about REST here, but you've got the others here, the gRPC, Kafkas, your GraphQLs, your Rabbits, and what have you. And what we're seeing as a starting to become a shift now is companies like Gravity are taking data privacy and data security in their gateway very seriously. They're producing these interfaces, and they're looking at using technology like ours to be able to just place it straight into your policies and immediately protect your data, whether that's coming via HTTP, a WebSocket, Kafka, or RabbitMQ. So we are moving in the direction. We are going in that direction. The gateway providers are waking up to this requirement. They're not moving as fast as we'd like them to be, but they are moving in that direction. But to ignore this, I think, is to ignore this at your peril on any API program. And any advice I can give is start thinking about this as early as possible in your program. Thank you, Sonal.
Great, thank you. So again, just to reiterate, I'm just going to finish up where we've just seen. But I think that's all good, Jen. We can stop there.
All right, all right. And thank you both for the presentation that you've given us today. And I feel like you've given us a lot to think about in the impact that we've had. Now, talking about security, what is the difference between API security and API data security? Because with them being so similar, I feel like that is a mix up. If you, when you say it in passing, we may mix up the two.
So, Bob, do you want to go with this one? Should I?
Yeah, sure. So I think we're all familiar with the OWASP principles, the OWASP top 10 principles. So obviously we've got to have a nod to that constantly. We can't ignore that. But what we're saying here is that fundamentally what nobody's really focusing down on is the information that's actually flowing through those APIs is technically vulnerable. If you, as soon as you get into that pipe, it's vulnerable. And it's even more vulnerable if you don't know where it's going, you don't know who's getting it, who's able to decrypt it. So I think the big difference for us, Jen, is very much I'd say we're not trying to secure the pipe, or WASP and various other practicals do that. We want to be securing what's actually flowing through the pipes.
I'm letting that one sink in because I think that's a great way to bring it back to what you were speaking about of ensuring the data, for example, when you talked about needing to work on things in the US. And that is a great way of explaining it. So thank you. Now, what are other vendors and gateways doing in this space, and what makes this set apart? Because I feel like if we're not all working together in it, it's not going to create a secure world.
Yeah, we're really excited about what's going on in gateways at the moment, because this isn't a broader opportunity not to just look at APIs, but building those patterns in at a gateway level. But all of the work that they're doing already around like being able to use gRPC, I think most of us are really excited about what we can do with that and how that's going to change the way that we consume data. But it is going to be a bigger pipe than JDBC and ODBC. So, having those controls in, the more volume you've got, the more risk you've got by putting those in. But equally, I guess that Rob, you've been dealing more with gravity, so to talk about it from that perspective.
Yeah, I think, Jen, from my perspective, I think the vendors could be doing a lot more in this space. It harks back a little bit to that API ecosystem. There's a lot of moving parts out there, which is sort of great if you want to piece it all together yourself. But realistically, certainly the big vendors, I feel, could be doing a lot more in this space around data protection, around being able to do this. We are seeing, that we are seeing a shift, because obviously I'm pleased to say that their customers are starting to push them. But I'll be honest, in my opinion, they could be doing a whole lot more in this space a lot quicker.
Definitely. And thank you for explaining that. Could you go a bit more into how to protect streaming data like Kafka?
Yeah, sure. So what we're doing is we as an organization aren't experts in every interface on the planet, clearly. So what we've got to be able to do as well is we're partnering with gateway providers to provide those interfaces for us. So, name dropping Gravity a wee bit here, they're doing a lot of research and a lot of implementation around Kafka, around gRPC, around the other streaming sort of protocols. So from our perspective, what we're saying is fundamentally, if the gateway providers are moving in this direction, it's very easy for a vendor like us to sit behind that. Once that data is deserialized, we can run all the checks on things, and we can reconstitute for the consumer, hopefully with a very little bump in the road. But I think that's key here, and I think that's really where the gateway vendors are potentially going to become. They're going to become those interface points. You're going to be buying them for the interface into Kafka. I think the key one there is, it's a similar pattern. We've seen organizations looking at huge Kafka topic lists costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, whereas actually same as the API diagram we just put up there, reduce that down to an account topic and allow the governance capabilities in the gateway to actually decide whether Jen can see account A or account B, thus reducing your massive expense on Kafka. So we're seeing that shift starting to happen. But yeah, I say not quite as fast as I'd like to see it personally.
Definitely. And thank you for that explanation. And again, thank you both for joining Interface this year and our 10-year anniversary. And please come back for another conference and we'll talk soon. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.